So the first item has been in the game for over 15 years now, and it still confuses players because it genuinely feels like a cursed item. We're talking about Music Disc 11. Music discs generally serve as a good addition to your base to make it feel less lonely, but for over a decade, people legit believed that if you had this disc in your base, it would make your whole world cursed. And honestly, I don't blame them, because if you actually hear it, you'll think the exact same thing. What makes this disc even more interesting is the fact that it has some deep lore that many of you might not even know. So before we dive into more details about it, let me play the disc for you. Creepy, right? You see, unlike every other record, this one is physically shattered. It's a broken piece of vinyl that shouldn't even be able to play in the first place. And when you put it in the jukebox, you realize quickly that you are basically listening to a 1 minute and 11-second recording of someone who's in a state of absolute terror. You can hear the heavy panicked breathing of someone, maybe Steve, running across stone blocks. Then you can hear frantic ruffling of paper, like someone is desperately checking a map or a journal, followed by the clicking of flint and steel. So the person is basically getting chased by someone and trying to light a fire to see who is chasing them. Now, there's actually a very specific timeline to this nightmare. Around 11 seconds in, the footsteps stop, but the heavy breathing still continues. Then another 11 seconds later, you hear a strong cough. It's almost too rhythmic to be accidental, meaning a lot of effort and thought went into the creation of this disc. By the time we get to the end, the footsteps transition from stone to dirt or gravel, followed by a disturbing noise of a screech or hiss before it cuts to static. The disc is exactly 1 minute, 11 seconds, and 111 milliseconds long. Now, most people stop there, but this disc is actually a rabbit hole, which starts when you stop listening to it and jump into the game files instead. If you take the 11.ogg file from the game's code and run it through a spectrogram, which turns sound waves into visual data, you will realize that the static is not an empty noise. The frequencies in that part align to create a creeper face, and right next to the face, there's a sequence of numbers 12, 4, 1, 8. In hexadecimal code, 12 translates to the letter C, spelling out C418, meaning the composer of Minecraft left a signature inside that disk. But the mystery does not end there. It goes deeper. And the next clue actually comes from C418 himself. Back in 2011, he tweeted something that recontextualizes the whole thing. He joked about being a weird monster that occasionally records songs from strangers and then dies in 11. Notch's reply to that tweet was even more insane. He confirmed that record was fun to draw, implying that Notch himself had drawn out the story for it. But this is where things get truly unsettling, because most people treat Disc 11 like a standalone mystery, But what if you want to understand what actually happened to that person in that recording? You have to look at another item in the game, Disc 13. While Disc 11 is the sound of a person, 13 is the sound of a place. It's filled with ominous cave chimes, dripping water, and sudden, sharp pings that make your skin crawl. On its own, Disc 13 feels like a collection of scary cave noises, but there is a technical link between 11 and 13 that the community could not solve for a long while. Disc 13 does something extremely weird where, at one point in the recording, the audio cuts to total, dead silence, and theories suggest that Disc 11 is supposed to be played at this exact moment. When you layer these two discs together, Disc 11 starts to make sense, and this was intentionally done by C418, meaning these aren't two different stories, they are two different perspectives of the same event. Disc 11 is the recording of the victim, while Disc 13 is the ambient recording of the cave itself. When you play them together, the silence in Disc 13 is exactly where the events of Disc 11 take place. But here's where the theory gets insane. This links back to that C418 tweet about a monster recording strangers. The real story isn't that a player died, it's that an Enderman was the one who was actually recording the audio. Even though Notch didn't post about making Enderman until a year after the Disc 11 files were added, C418 was already working on the sounds way before Disc 11 was added. If you listen to that screech at the end of Disc 11, it matches the twin peak pitch of an Enderman scream and its static death cry perfectly. This is why you only ever find music discs in places owned by mobs, dungeons, mansions, bastions, or by making a skeleton kill a creeper. Mobs follow us around to record our stories as strangers in their world. Disc 11 is the recording of a hunt where the player finally fought back. It turns the disc into a literal black box recording of an Enderman that documented a player got caught and died in the process. Now, finding Discs 11 and 13 is a massive grind, but this next Easter egg is exceptional because it is sitting in plain sight. Almost everyone has seen it, yet a very small fraction of players has actually taken out the time to notice just how creepy it is. This particular Easter egg appears when you finally kill the Ender Dragon and jump through that portal. For many players, that is the end of the game, and they just close it. However, if you wait for a few seconds, the screen goes black, and you get hit with this massive 9-minute wall of text. Most people think that's just a credit scene that would be thanking the creators, and they decided to go grab a snack. You also probably just smashed the escape key to get back to your base. But if you actually sit there and read this wall of text, it's easily the most existential, dread-inducing, low-key terrifying thing in the entire game. This is the end poem, and reading through it is like staring into an infinite void that makes you question if you're even real, if anything is even real. But before we get into further details, if you're enjoying the video so far, consider subscribing. It's free and helps a lot. Now, let's talk about the backstory of this Easter egg, which is as weird as the end poem itself. You see, back in 2011, Notch wanted some cheesy over-the-top text for the ending. You know, the typical, "you're a hero" stuff. So he asked the community what he should do, and everyone told him one name, Julian Go. So naturally, Notch reached out to him and asked him to write an ending for Minecraft. And this is where things get crazy, because Julian didn't give him a congrats message. He turned in this cosmic, psychedelic script that was so intense, Notch just kept the whole thing exactly as it was. It's 1,500 words of pure dread, and when you pair it with C418's haunting music, it makes you feel incredibly small. And here's where it gets even more creepy. The poem is actually a dialogue between two entities in the game code. They're just labeled as dark aqua and dark green. We have no idea who they are, but they talk about us, the players, like they've been watching us since the Big Bang. They even list off names humans have given them over thousands of years. Everything from spirits and angels to modern science terms like leptons and quarks. They basically claim to be the universe itself, and they tell you, straight up, that they can read your thoughts as you're sitting there at your desk. What makes this even more surprising is that these entities are essentially pushing a philosophy that says there is a massive glitch in the Matrix, and this is where you will realize just how disturbing this whole thing is, because the poem argues that everything you experience is just a dream. It says your life has two layers, the short dream, the Minecraft world you just left, and the long dream, your actual waking life. And if you haven't understood the whole thing yet, to put it simply, the game is literally telling you that your real life is just another simulation, like the game just finished, and your 9 to 5 on your school day is no more real than the dirt blocks you just mined. And then it hits you with the ultimate eye-opening words that, to be fair, would even put someone extremely silly in a state of absolute terror. It pulls your actual username from your account and starts giving you commands. It tells you to move your fingers, feel the air in your lungs, and wake up. It's a total mind trip, because the game is essentially saying that by finishing the game, you aren't actually returning to reality. You're just waking up, going from one small dream to another bigger one. And as if that wasn't weird enough, the real-life drama that took place behind the scenes about this specific part of the game is equally weird, because for years, people wondered why Microsoft never touched or updated the poem after they bought Minecraft for $2.5 billion. Well, in 2022, Julian Go dropped a massive secret, and it was that Microsoft didn't actually own the ending to their own game, because Julian never signed the contract back in 2011. He said the terms were bad, so when the big buyout happened, the legal rights to the end poem got stuck in this weird limbo. And then Julian made a move that made him stand out as a true artist. A move that feels like a final middle finger to the system. He ended up releasing the entire poem into the public domain for free. He said the universe, aka the fans, should own the poem and not a billion-dollar company. So, the one part of Minecraft that tells you nothing is real is technically the only part of the game that actually belongs to us. Moving on from the old school history, we need to talk about what's actually happening in the game right now, because honestly, it kind of feels like a fever dream. During Minecraft Live in March 2026, Mojang finally revealed the Chaos Cubed update. They're adding these sulfur caves that look dizzying to even walk through. But the thing everyone is losing their mind over is the sulfur cube. I know, another cube. We've had slimes and magma cubes for a decade, but wait till you hear the whole story, because this thing is actually messed up. It's the first mob we've ever seen that doesn't really have its own body, or let's just say properties, because it's actually a kind of shapeshifter that eats blocks from the world, and how it behaves totally depends on what it just ate. When the update dropped, the devs showed that this mob physically absorbs whatever it touches, and its entire behavior changes based on the specific properties of the block it ate. Like, imagine you're building a base, and a sulfur cube rolls over your wooden planks. It would suck the wood into its own body and become this bouncy wooden projectile that would start launching itself wherever you point it. Or, if it slides over a patch of ice, it suddenly loses all its friction and starts zipping around the biome like a high-speed hockey puck. It's basically a gelatinous parasite that's looting the environment to steal the properties of different blocks. But the real creepy factor about it is the biome that created them, which means that these new sulfur caves are genuinely a very messed up biome that's creating parasitic creatures that can literally eat the very world they exist in. If you've been around Minecraft for even a few weeks, you would have probably heard about the legendary Farlands. You see, back in the day, this was the ultimate holy grail in the game lore community, apart from another Easter egg that we'll discuss later in the game. This specific Easter egg was like reaching the edge of the world, but instead of just falling off, the entire world would literally start to glitch right in front of you. Now, most people just think it's some random, messy bug that got added into the game along the way, but there's more to it, because there's a very specific point where the game just gives up. And to be honest with you guys, it's way creepier than just a coding error. The phenomenon itself doesn't just happen whenever it feels like it. You have to travel over 12.5 million blocks away from where you first spawned before things start to get weird. And that's not a random distance either. Minecraft uses a very specific math formula called Perlin noise to build the world. But at that 12.5 million mark, the math hits a wall. The numbers literally get so high that they break the game's limit, and everything goes south. And this is where it gets actually insane, because the math at this point in the game is basically having a total mental breakdown, as the game stops making normal hills or trees, and instead, it starts spitting out these massive 128 block high walls of solid ground full of these weird Swiss cheese holes. And if you're crazy enough to go to that exact spot on both the X and Z axes at the same time, you hit the corner Farlands. The world warps into these giant floating sandwiches of land with nothing but a void in between. It's a place you were never supposed to see, and it would definitely give anyone chills because it's so out of the norm. However, the reason the Farlands are so unsettling isn't just the weird terrain alone. It's also because the physics of the game start to rot before the land itself breaks. As you get closer to that 12.5 million mark, the world basically tries to kick you out. Your character starts to shake and jitter like crazy because the game can't figure out exactly where you are anymore. At one point, it would get so bad that your character wouldn't even be able to walk in a straight line. The game engine starts to reject you, and it gets even weirder when you realize half the stuff you're looking at isn't even there. Past a certain point, the blocks look solid, but they have no hitbox. You'll try to walk on a stone ledge and just fall straight through the floor into the void. And if that wasn't enough, at that point in the game, the sound engine breaks as well. Torches stop giving off light, and noises might play minutes late or just loop forever. The most legendary person to ever look into this was a guy named Kurt J. Mack. Way back in 2011, he started a series called Farlands or Bust. His goal was simple: to walk all the way there without cheating. For over a decade, people watched him slowly drift into this abyss. Then, on October 4th, 2025, after 14 and a half years of walking, Kurt finally hit that 12,550,821 mark live on Twitch. It was a massive moment, and he even raised over $500,000 for charity, and it proved the Farlands weren't just a myth. They were a real place you could get to. Now, Notch eventually fixed this in the old beta 1.8 update, but the ghost of the Farlands is still in the Bedrock edition. In that version, people call them the Stripe Lands. Instead of a giant wall, the world just stops rendering every other block, so you get this weird striped pattern of land and void. It looks different, but it pretty much has the same vibe. Moving on from that, we have to talk about something that literally just dropped a few weeks ago. In March 2026, Mojang released the 26.1 Tiny Takeover update, and at first it seemed like the most wholesome thing ever, because they finally gave baby mobs their own unique models and sounds. But if you look at the crafting table, there's this new item called the golden dandelion, and it is actually kind of dark, really dark. The recipe itself is super simple. You just need a dandelion and some gold nuggets, and if you feed it to a baby mob, they stay a baby forever. Now, most people are hyped about this because it means you can keep a tiny fox or a baby axolotl in your base without it ever growing up. But when you actually think about it, this is messed up. You're basically taking a living creature and forcing its body to stop working correctly. You're trapping it in this permanent, weird state of infancy just because you think it looks cute. So, in simple terms, you're freezing their life in time. The golden dandelion is giving those baby mobs an eternal childhood that the animal never asked for, and in a world that's already full of biological dead ends, like that dragon egg that we'll get into later. The golden dandelion lets you fill your world with things that aren't even supposed to exist. If you spent any time at all in the end, or even just heard one wandering around your base at night, you definitely know what an Enderman usually sounds like. It's almost like a weird alien warbling, a bunch of whoops and distorted groans that honestly just sound gross and really creepy. Most people do not give much thought to it and just brush it off as random monster noise and move on. But if you actually treat those noises as game files and really analyze them in detail, you will stumble onto one of the most unsettling Easter eggs in the entire game, because as it turns out, the Endermen are not making random noises. They're actually trying to talk to you. The community figured this out by taking these specific idle files from the game code and throwing them into audio software. If you play them normally, it's total gibberish, but when you reverse the audio and crank the pitch up, you realize what's actually in those audio files. In the first file, you can hear a distorted whisper saying, "Here," which sounds less like a groan and more like an invitation. In the next one, it's a breathy, "Higher," or just a simple, "Hey." The third one is the most obvious. It's a very clear, "What's up?" or "This way." But the fourth file is the one that actually gives me chills. It's a reversed groan that clearly says, "Forever," which might be a reference to the end dimension, where the Enderman is trying to talk about being stuck in the void for eternity. The last file, however, is a reversed, "Uh-oh," like the thing is reacting to the fact that you finally spotted it. Now, most of you might be wondering that this could just be a shortcut taken by the composer, where he got lazy and decided to make them like this. Well, you would be surprised to know that it was a deliberate choice to make them sound almost human, which is actually way more terrifying, because this discovery is basically the backbone of the ancient builder theory. The idea behind that is that Endermen were once humans, builders just like us, who went to the end ages ago to escape some disaster, and after being trapped there for thousands of years and eating nothing but chorus fruit, they evolved into these tall, purple-eyed shadows. They lost their bodies, but they kept these tiny broken pieces of their language buried somewhere deep inside their hearts. It's a very specific kind of horror that can't really be put into words, because it means when an Enderman is making noises outside your house and you kill it, you might be killing someone who was once a person who's been distorted by the void, desperately trying to remember how to speak. And as everyone already knows, it gets even more intense when you look them in the eye, because the sound switches from those calm, reversed words to the scream file, which isn't speech at all. Instead, the scream sounds are just pure, processed static, designed to make your brain hit the panic button. The fact that they can go from a chill, "what's up?" to a chilling speech in a split second is exactly why the Endermen are still considered one of the most disturbing mobs in the entire game by many people. Next up, we are going to talk about an everyday item in the game. You see, in Minecraft, if you put a name tag on a mob, it usually just gives them a little floating tile. Sometimes you get a funny Easter egg, like flipping a cow upside down or making a sheep turn rainbow. But there's one specific name that actually triggers one of the most violent shifts in the entire game. And it might be one of the creepiest Easter eggs in normal gameplay. It's a 6-letter name, and it is used for a very specific mob. If you write out the name and put it on that mob, you are actually rewriting its brain, and it is not some random joke that the devs decided to add. In reality, it is a hidden tribute to one of the most famous horror movies ever made. This secret Easter egg only works on the Vindicators, and to understand why it works the way it does, you need to first understand where these mobs spawn. They spawn deep inside woodland mansions, and if you stop for a second and think about it, the woodland mansions are massive, lonely wooden houses hidden in the middle of the dark forests, which perfectly mirrors the empty hotel from The Shining. And if you have not seen that movie, it is a legendary movie where the main character, Jack Torrance, slowly loses his mind until he grabs an axe and kills his entire family. But there is one single moment in that movie that eventually became a meme, where he forces his way through a door using his axe and screams, "Here's Johnny." And if you haven't connected the dots yet, what do Vindicators carry? Iron axes. The devs clearly saw the connection and decided to do something sneaky with those mobs, because when you take a name tag and write Johnny on it with a capital J, the Vindicator basically becomes a deranged version of Jack. Now, normally these guys are actually pretty chill. They just defend their houses. Their default AI tells them to only attack players, golems, or villagers when they feel like they are under a threat. And usually, they'll walk right past a cow or a pig without a second look. But the second you name the mob Johnny, a hidden switch flips in the game's backend. His logic is completely overwritten. At this point, the mob loses all sense of self-preservation. He turns into a mindless killer that will charge at and slaughter literally anything that moves. He'll hunt down sheep, pick fights with Endermen, and he'll even go after a boss like the Wither without hesitating, just blindly swinging that axe at the very first living thing he sees. But even in this state of total rage, the Johnny AI has two weird blind spots. He'll never attack other illagers, and strangely enough, he won't touch ghasts. But it actually makes sense when you look at the code. Ghasts don't have the standard tags that trigger melee attacks for ground mobs. This basically makes them invisible to him. It creates this eerie vibe where the only things safe from the crazy Johnny are literal ghosts and his own cult members. However, the most disturbing part of this isn't even the movie reference, though. It's what players actually decided to do with it. Because the Johnny AI is so aggressive and ignores the normal rules, the community turned this horror reference into a dark mechanical exploit. People started building these automated slaughterhouses where they trap a Johnny in a pit and use him as an infinite, autonomous killing machine. They just drop animals or hostile mobs into the hole and let the crazy mob do all the work while they sit back and collect the loot through hoppers. It's pretty wild. We took a secret hidden reference to a psychological horror movie and turned it into an industrial farm. But as dark as that is, it's nothing compared to the next mob on the list. Now, this next Easter egg hits way different than anything else we've talked about. It's not a movie reference or a glitch, but it's actually pretty sad. Most people see it as a cute little Easter egg, but when you look at why it's actually in the game, you'll understand why I called it sad earlier. I'm talking about the rabbit named Toast. Minecraft is a game that is full of random animals, And Toast is basically a grave you can interact with. It's a permanent memorial to a real-life pet that went missing over 10 years ago. The whole thing started back in 2014. This Mojang dev named Ryan Holtz was working on adding rabbits to the game when he saw a post on Reddit. Some guy's girlfriend had a pet rabbit named Toast that had just disappeared, and he was heartbroken. He just asked if there was any way the devs could add a skin that looked like her pet to cheer her up. Ryan saw it and went like, "Yeah bro, I got you." And a few days later, Toast was officially in the code. To see it yourself, you just need to take a name tag and type Toast with a capital T. The second you slap that on a rabbit, the game completely changes how it looks. It forces this very specific black and white pattern on the normal rabbit skin, specifically with a white stripe between the eyes. And here's the weird part. You can't really find this rabbit normally. You could wander through every desert and forest for 1,000 hours, and you'll never see a toast rabbit naturally. It only shows up if you specifically name it. It's almost like you're reaching into the game files to pull out something that isn't supposed to be there. And there's something interesting about how this Easter egg works, because if you breed a toast rabbit, the babies don't look like him at all. They just come out with whatever normal fur the rabbit had before you named it. The toast look isn't part of the animal's DNA at all. It's just an add-on skin that sits on top of the mob for a little bit. The reason this one always ends up on creepy lists is because of how heavy it is. See, the real-life toast was never found, and by adding this to the game, the dev took an animal that vanished from the real world and trapped it in a digital loop forever. So technically, when you name a rabbit Toast, you're basically summoning the ghost of a pet you never even knew. Even after that dev left Mojang, they kept this Easter egg in the game. Back in 2022, when they updated the rabbit models to be more detailed, they made sure to fix the Toast skin, specifically so it wouldn't break. But while Toast is just a friendly ghost of a pet, there are other secrets in this game that suggest you might be getting watched in your private world. If you've been in the Minecraft community for even a week, you've definitely heard the name Herobrine. He's the original internet ghost story, the one that basically defined the childhood of every kid growing up with the game in the 2010s. But what's actually wild is that even though we all know he's fake, the way the legend was born is way more interesting than just some random campfire story. If you want to just brush it off, thinking that Herobrine was just some simple rumor, you'd be seriously mistaken, because it was actually this massive, multi-layered prank that actually used the game's own developers and official update notes to keep the mystery alive for over a decade. It all started back in 2010 with a single, lonely post on 4chan. This anonymous user claimed they were playing a solo world on an old version of the game when they suddenly saw something moving in the distance. At first, they thought it was just a cow, so they chased it into the fog. But when they finally got close, they realized it was a character using the default Steve skin, except there was something deeply wrong with him. His eyes were solid, glowing white. He had no name tag, and it was just this figure standing in the fog, watching the player. Then things started to get weird, because he started finding things in his world that shouldn't be in a single-player world, ranging from perfect 2x2 tunnels, random sand pyramids in the ocean, and trees with every block with no leaves. The story got even creepier when the user tried to post about it on the forums. They claimed their threads were being deleted instantly, and then they supposedly got a private message from a user named Herobrine that just said, "Stop." This is where the legendary Notch's dead brother story comes from. Rumors spread like crazy that this was Notch's secret way of remembering a brother who passed away long ago. When someone allegedly emailed Notch to ask, he supposedly replied with, "I did, but he is no longer with us." But later, Notch confirmed that he never even had a brother, and by that point, the internet didn't care about the truth. The myth was already on fire. But while 4chan gave this myth its initial push, it was the Brocraft live streams that turned this into a global thing. Two streamers named Copeland and Patamus staged these incredibly detailed sightings that convinced thousands of live viewers that Herobrine was real, and Copeland's trick was actually legendary. He retextured a painting to look like Herobrine and put it in a room in his world. During a stream, he stumbled onto it, screamed his head off, and cut the feed immediately. He even made a creepy website that showed a gif of Herobrine with realistic, moving eyes, and the text, "Wake up." And what's really genius is how Mojang actually handled it. Instead of just saying, "He's not real," and moving on, they leaned into the meme. Starting in 2011, they began adding a single, mysterious line to the official patch notes, which said, "Removed Herobrine." They did this for dozens of updates over the years, while in reality it was just a joke. For a kid reading those notes, it felt like Mojang was in a constant losing battle to keep this thing out of the game. Like Herobrine was this evil creature in the game, who even the devs could not defeat. The final chapter of this whole thing actually happened in 2021, when a group of researchers called Minecraft at Home used a massive amount of computing power to do something insane. They actually found the original world seed from that first 4chan screenshot, and they even found the exact hill and the exact coordinates where Herobrine was first sighted. And when they finally got there, the hill was completely empty. There was no wide-eyed Steve, and there were no weird structures in the world either. This was the final proof everyone needed to realize that the original image was just a very clever edit. But even with all that proof, Herobrine is still something people look for every time they enter a new cave. The idea that he's a silent builder, leaving redstone torches in tunnels, is just part of how we think about the game now. Mojang still says he's not in the game, but in a way, they don't even have to add him, because as long as players are still afraid of what's hiding in the fog, Herobrine is never truly gone. But if you think a ghost in the fog is scary, wait until you hear about the secret mobs that literally nobody knows about yet. Because if you think Herobrine is the peak of Minecraft horror, you probably haven't seen the dock mobs yet. We're going all the way back to 2010, to the early in-dev days when Notch hired this artist named Hayden Scott Barron, aka Doc, who wasn't really vibing with the bloxy, pixelated style we know today. He was an illustrator who loved this specific chibi anime look, and for exactly 2 weeks, Minecraft felt like a corrupted crossover from a totally different game. These things were basically the first attempt at adding NPCs. They dropped on January 29th, 2010, and let me tell you, they looked like nothing else in the game. They weren't even made of blocks. Instead, they were high-poly 3D models imported from games like Quake 3. But since they didn't actually fit the engine, they had zero lighting or proper animations. They'd just glide across the grass at high speeds without moving their limbs, looking like creepy cardboard cutouts being dragged by an invisible string. The main one was Rana. She was this little girl in a giant frog hat. And while she was technically peaceful, she had one detail that made her genuinely unsettling to stumble across in a dark cave. She was the first mob to ever use human pain sounds, and if you hit her, she'd let out this heavy male oof, the exact same sound the player used back then. It was such a weird, unsettling feeling, where attacking a stylized little girl sounded like a grown man. And if you killed her, she'd just drop some apples and roses and vanish instantly. Then there was Beast Boy, and yeah, he was straight up based on the DC character. He had the green skin and the purple suit, but his model was so broken that he spent his entire existence in a permanent, static crouch. He'd just glide towards you, hovering an inch off the ground like some weird green statue. And he was followed by 2 versions of Steve. But not our Steve. They were these frantic, high-speed humanoids that moved way faster than anything else in the game, almost like they were glitching. But the creepiest part about these mobs wasn't even the design. It was how they acted in the code. In that specific version of the game, the spawn rates were totally bugged. You'd go over a hill and suddenly see 50 ranas all standing perfectly still, staring in random directions. Then, all at once, they'd start gliding toward you at the same time. And since they didn't work with the lighting engine, they were always full bright. Imagine being in a pitch-black tunnel, and a glowing, chibi frog girl just glides out of the darkness at you, with zero warning. Doc ended up leaving Mojang just a few days after these were added because of creative differences, and the mobs were deleted from the game almost immediately. That left them as this weird, lost media of Minecraft history. If you see footage of them today, you would feel like you're watching a corrupted save file where assets from a completely different game leaked into Minecraft by some mistake. But as weird as those characters were, they weren't the only thing being tested behind the scenes, because while Doc was working on anime girls, the community was discovering something much more technical, hidden right in the game's texture packs. You see, sometimes the creepiest Easter eggs in Minecraft aren't even in the world you're walking through. You can also find a ton of them buried in the game's code, and sometimes they can be pretty weird. If you go back to the older versions and get the texture file for the classic zombie pigmen straight from the assets, you'll find something you'd never see just by playing the game. Minecraft skins are usually mapped out on flat 2D squares, but the 3D models don't use every single pixel on that square. So sometimes these are invisible, unused layers in the file. And in the old zombie pigman texture, Notch literally wrote "Thanks, Zophobia" in blocky white text, and it just stayed hidden for years until people actually found the original texture file. Now, I know what you're thinking. Zophobia sounds like some edgy creepypasta or a new boss like Herobrine, but he was actually just an early community member. Back in the alpha days, Notch didn't create every single mob design himself. Zophobia was the artist who pitched the concept and made the skin, and Notch loved it so much he dropped it straight into the game for the Nether update. That hidden text was Notch's way of crediting and respecting him in a way, where only coders or texture artists would ever stumble across it. But the truly unsettling part about this whole thing isn't even the hidden text. It's what Mojang forced him to change before they released it. You see, the original versions Zophobia submitted didn't have the green, rotting flesh we all know today. It was way more graphic. The skull was partially exposed, and it looked genuinely butchered, like something out of a horror movie. Notch decided the red blood was too gory for the game's vibe, so he recolored it to make it look like rotting moss instead of a fresh corpse. And if you haven't connected dots yet, the iconic green ooze we grew up with is literally just censored blood. This whole story has a pretty somber ending though, because when the massive 1.16 Nether update dropped, Mojang completely wiped the classic zombie pigmen and replaced it with the new zombified piglin. They completely revamped the entire model and redrew the texture from scratch. And in that process, the original file was deleted from the active game. After nearly a decade of hiding in that secret layer, the Thanks Zophobia signature was erased from modern Minecraft forever. The community fought really hard to get a naming Easter egg that would bring the old texture back, but Mojang completely ignored it, making this one of the most legendary pieces of lost media in the history of the game. This next Easter egg is also about the Nether, because we all know that the second you step through the portal and spawn into the Nether, the vibe of that place just hits you like a brick. It's insanely loud and red, very visually heavy for some people. And you would be surprised to know that a massive reason for that whole "get me out of here" feeling is the sound design of the biome itself, specifically the ghasts. The ghasts don't roar like a dragon or groan like some basic zombies. Instead, they make these weird, deep whines while they're just floating around. And then sometimes, they let out this absolutely horrific, ear-piercing shriek the second they're about to spit a fireball right at your face. For years, everyone thought these sounds were made in some high-tech lab, or were just heavily edited human screams to fit that whole hell aesthetic of the Nether. But the truth is actually just kind of hilarious. The legend himself, C418, the guy who made the original soundtrack for Minecraft, didn't use human actors or fancy software at all to create the sounds of the ghast. And believe it or not, the voice of the Nether's scariest monster was actually just his pet cat. I'm dead serious. C418 confirmed this in a Reddit AMA a while back. He said that he wanted something organic and weird for the game, and his cat, which deep lore fans think was a ginger named Nick, was just napping in the room while he was working, so he woke the cat up on purpose to get the recording. I know, sounds a little mean, but those annoyed, groggy meows that cat lets out when you wake them up from their slumber were exactly what he caught on the mic. And obviously, a house cat meowing doesn't naturally sound like a giant, demonic floating jellyfish, so he had to edit the audio heavily to make it fit. He dropped the pitch way down to make it sound more deep and give it a heavy vibrating bass. Then he slowed the audio down a ton, because a cat's meow has these tiny, shaky breaths and trills, so stretching them out turned them into these long, ghostly wails that sounded like they were coming from another dimension. Then he threw in a bunch of reverb to make it sound like it was bouncing off massive cave walls, and boom, he had just created one of the scariest mob sounds in the game. So next time you're sprinting for your life to dodge a fireball, just remember that terrifying scream is literally just a very grumpy cat that wanted to keep napping. But as funny as that is, there's another huge hidden secret Easter egg in this game that I'm betting most of you have never even heard of. Nowadays, when most games crash, it's honestly just boring. You get a static little pop-up with a random code like error 0x004 or some generic message saying the app stopped responding. And honestly, that's just usually how error messages are handled. But Minecraft? Yeah, they're a bit different. Let's just say they don't like normal, because back in the early days of Minecraft, we're talking alpha, beta, all the way up to the 1.5 era, the game handled crashes in a way that was actually kind of weird. Back then, when the game hit a fatal error, or you forced it to close through your task manager, it would generate this massive text file called a crash report. Most people just ignored the giant wall of code because it looked like gibberish. But if you actually scrolled to the very bottom of that file, before the game died, it would print one final line. And it didn't say error or close. It just said, "Someone is closing me." To understand why that's so weird, you have to look at how the game was actually built. Since Minecraft runs on Java, the devs use this thing called a shutdown hook. Think of it like a digital tripwire. So when the system detects the game is being killed from the outside, that hook acts like a last dying breath. It gives the game a tiny fraction of a second to try and save your files or print one last message before it's wiped from your memory forever. Now, here's the thing. Notch didn't have to put a message there at all. He could have left it blank, or written something professional like "process terminated." Instead, he specifically chose this panicked first-person sentence, and that's exactly why it became such a legendary creepy fact in the community. It gives you this heavy sense of dread that you just don't see in software anymore. By using words like "someone" and "me," the error log stops feeling like cold code and starts making the game engine sound like a conscious entity that's aware of its own digital existence. It honestly just completely flips the script and makes you the villain of the story, like you're there just closing a window to do homework, and the program is frantically trying to report its death in its final millisecond of life. However, it's a pretty interesting fact, as it turned a boring technical crash into something everyone would remember for years. Microsoft eventually phased this out as they modernized the launcher, but it's still archived in thousands of old forum posts from a decade ago. It's a secret little creepy Easter egg in that launcher that we all just collectively ignored for years. Now let's talk about an Easter egg that's been sitting right in front of our faces this whole time, yet only a few people know about it. We're talking about the literal face of Minecraft, the Creeper, which is easily the most iconic monster in the history of Minecraft. You see that green face on t-shirts, backpacks, even cereal boxes. But here's the thing most people don't realize. The Creeper has absolutely no reason to exist. It doesn't fit the whole fantasy vibe of Minecraft, like a dragon or a zombie. And that's because the Creeper is quite literally just a walking glitch. The story of how this thing was actually made is probably the ultimate happy accident in gaming history. It all started back in August 2009. We're talking the super primitive days when the game was barely even a game yet. Notch was just sitting at his computer, trying to add some basic animals to the world. And he started with a pig. But back then, he wasn't using 3D modeling software like Blender. He had to manually type the dimensions, the length, width, and height of every single body part directly into the code. And since a Minecraft model is basically just a collection of boxes, it's easy to mess up. When Notch was typing the code for the pig's torso, he made a tiny typo that changed everything. He accidentally swapped the length and the height. So instead of a box that was short and long like a normal pig on all fours, the math spat out a box that was tall and narrow. And because the code still told the legs to attach to the corners of this vertical torso, the result was this bizarre, towering freak of nature. Notch looked at his coding disaster, and instead of hitting delete, he realized it was just too creepy to get rid of. He knew he wanted to keep it as a monster, but a gray box isn't exactly scary. It needed a skin, and since Minecraft was just a one-man project at the time, Notch was efficient, which is a nice way of saying he was a little lazy with his textures. The Creeper's iconic green skin is also not a custom design at all. It's literally just the game's original oak leaf texture, because if you take those old leaf files, strip away the transparency, and tint it that neon green, you get the exact pattern of the Creeper's body. He then threw a weird frowning face on it, and just like that, the most famous monster in the world was born. Notch even mentioned later that he imagined creepers feeling crunchy, like a pile of dry leaves, which is why he used that texture in the first place. But while the design was an accident, the way the creeper behaves was very intentional. Notch wanted this thing to be a very unique kind of threat. Unlike zombies that groan or skeletons that clatter around, the creeper was programmed to have zero idle sounds. It doesn't hum or growl at all. And it gets even crazier, because the creeper doesn't even have its own footstep audio. Its steps were programmed to sound exactly like the players, making it a perfect stealthy predator. Originally, they were supposed to just sprint at you and explode the second they touched you, but Notch decided that wasn't annoying enough. He added that countdown fuse and that obnoxious hissing sound, which actually sounds like a balloon is about to pop if you listen closely. Then later on, he also added the mechanic where getting hit by lightning turns them into a glowing blue nuke called the Charged Creeper. The irony is actually kinda funny when you think about it, because a simple typo in 2009 gave birth to a monster so famous, it's now part of the official Minecraft logo. When rabbits first got added into the game back in 2014, everyone thought they were just these cute, wholesome little additions to the forest. But Mojang actually hid a massive digital secret in the spawn rates that most players didn't see coming. Back then, every time a rabbit spawned, there was a tiny 1 in 1,000 chance that it would secretly be the killer bunny. You see, the creepy thing about this mob was that it didn't spawn in caves or dark corners like other mobs. It would just spawn randomly in broad daylight right next to the regular innocent animals. Imagine you're playing back then. You see a white bunny in a field, and you run over to tame it. You'd be totally unprepared for what happens next, because that little guy was basically a time bomb disguised as a cute little rabbit. Its design was also way creepier than normal rabbits in the game, and no, it was not mutated and it didn't have extra limbs either. For the most part, it looks almost exactly like a normal white rabbit, except for one tiny, terrifying detail. Its eyes. While a normal Minecraft rabbit has vertical black eyes, the killer bunny's eyes are flipped sideways, and they're blood red. And the problem was that by the time you got close enough to notice that 1 pixel difference, you were already dead. The second you got close to this mob, the AI would instantly flip a switch. You would first see it stop what it was doing. Then all of a sudden, the killer rabbit would start lunging at you in this frantic spider-like way, jumping way faster and higher than any rabbit should. And it also dealt an insane amount of damage. On normal difficulty, 1 bite from this mob would take off 4 full hearts. To put that in perspective, this tiny fluffy animal does more melee damage than a zombie, a spider, or even a skeleton. And it gets even weirder. Because of this glitch in its biology, it's completely immune to the Thorn's enchantment, meaning if you had that enchantment on your high tier armor, it would have done 0 damage to the killer rabbit for biting you. It would also sometimes go on these absolute rampages, hunting down wolves and foxes, and completely flipping the game's food chain upside down. However, the killer bunny didn't actually last long in the game though. The lead dev, Jeb, pulled it from the natural spawn pool pretty quickly. And it wasn't just because people were complaining it was too hard to kill. It was a big deal for the game's visual contract. Basically, Minecraft has a rule where if a mob looks like a rotting zombie or a giant spider, it's dangerous. If it looks like a pig or a sheep, like a normal animal, it's safe. And having a cute animal that randomly murders you totally broke that trust. Even though it's gone from the natural world, Mojang never actually deleted the code. The killer bunny is still hard-coded into the game today. The only catch is you have to use a specific command with a hidden data tag to see it. But as dangerous as a killer rabbit sounds, there's an even older mystery involving the Nether that most of you probably have no idea about. When the massive 1.16 Nether update dropped, the warped forest was basically pitched to us as this rare, blue safe haven. It's actually the only spot in the entire Nether where hostile mobs like ghasts, piglins, and those annoying magma cubes just refuse to spawn. The ground is covered in this calm cyan fungi, and the only guys you'll see hanging out there are Endermen and Striders. On the surface, it feels peaceful, like there's nothing wrong with this whole biome. But the second you stop moving and actually listen to the sounds of it, that illusion of this place being safe would instantly shatter to pieces. You see, the devs deliberately stripped away all the normal background music here, and the reason is they wanted to make room for something way darker. If you go into the game files and pull the ambient noise for the warped forest, you'll find out something insane, because the noises in this specific region are not random cave sounds. Every single audio track that is being used in this region is actually a heavily distorted Enderman noise. The first few files are a weird blend of standard Enderman sounds that are mixed with audio from Minecraft dungeons, but the 6th file is where it gets genuinely disturbing. It's officially the sound of an Enderman screaming, but the audio has been reversed and slowed down a lot. Even the random mood sounds that play here are just the cackle of a witch, pitched way down and drowned in reverb. So in short, all the sounds you hear in this biome are literally just the distorted voices of the creepiest mobs in the game. And this actually leads into one of the most cryptic pieces of dev lore ever. When people started piecing these files together and noticed there was no music, they started asking questions. They wanted to know why this one forest was so uniquely messed up. Well, the lead sound designer, Samuel A. Berg, eventually dropped a statement that changed how we look at the Nether forever. He simply said that something in the forests disrupts reality. Yeah, that was it. He didn't say anything else. However, that one quote implies something terrifying. The warped forest might not even be a natural part of the Nether at all. The prevailing theory is that the Endermen aren't just visiting this place. They're the actual symptom of a massive interdimensional infection, or a rift. And since Endermen are the only creatures that can rip through space to teleport, their constant warping might be bleeding the in-dimension itself into the Nether. This also explains the cyan fungi here. It could be that this leakage is mutating the red-crimson fungi into these warped blue versions. It also explains why every other nether mob stays as far away as possible from this place, because it is literally cursed. But as scary as a glitching forest is, there's another secret in the nether that's just as creepy. For years, everyone just thought the texture on soul sand was random. But if you actually stop for a second and really look at the pixels, it's pretty obvious what you're seeing. What if I told you that this design was not random at all, and instead, it was an intentional secret design reference that the devs added to the game? If you look closely, you will realize that there are 3 very distinct, hollow-eyed faces trapped in every single block. And what makes this even scarier is that this hand-drawn art of people literally looks like they are screaming in agony. But hold up, this is where the whole thing actually gets really creepy. Everyone knows that whenever you walk on the soul sand, it slows you down. And it's not just you, it slows down the mobs as well. And if you think it's because the ground is muddy, then my friend, you are seriously mistaken. Now try to understand this. You get slowed down when you walk on the soul sand because the trapped souls are physically reaching out of the sand, grabbing your ankles, and trying to pull you down into the block with them. And the lore gets way darker when you get into a soul sand valley. Honestly, the background noise in this place is the most disturbing sound design in the history of the game. The community actually decoded the sound files from this biome, and what they found was seriously chilling. Most of these sounds are just heavily pitched down and stretched out audio from other mobs, twisted to sound like thousands of people echoing off the walls, turning the whole biome into a massive, humming graveyard. Now, there's a big theory about these blocks that we need to clear up. For a long time, people thought the screaming faces on soul sand always pointed west to lure you toward a nether fortress, but that's actually a total myth. It's true you can use soul sand like a compass, but it's not because these souls are pointing at danger. In Minecraft, blocks that don't rotate, like soul sand, just have a static texture. That means the top of the block always looks the exact same on the map, no matter which way you're facing. Players just learned to recognize the pixel patterns so they could figure out north, south, east, or west when they're lost. The real connection to the fortresses is just how the game builds them. They usually spawn in long, straight lines running north to south. So if you're lost, the best strategy is to travel directly east or west until you hit one of those lines. The block isn't a haunted GPS. People are just using the faces in the sand to find west, so they can hunt the fortresses down themselves. But as creepy as the soul sand is, there's something even more unsettling in the game that the devs hid right under our noses. Now that we're finally out of the nether, we need to talk about something that happens before you even place a single block. I want you to think about the whole ritual of booting up Minecraft. We all do it without thinking, right? It's almost an automated process in your brain that mostly never ever gets registered. You double-click the grass icon, and you load into the main game interface where the massive Minecraft logo drops. You've probably seen this happen a bazillion times. But mathematically speaking, what if I told you that there's a massive chance that at some point the game actually lied to your face and your brain just completely covered for it? See, there's a massive secret hidden inside the Java code that rolls a random number every single time you open the app. If that number lands on a super rare 1 in 10,000 chance, the game ignores the standard title screen entirely. Instead, it subtly swaps the C and the E, so the logo actually says Mince Raft instead of Minecraft. And here's the crazy part. The difference is so small that you probably didn't even notice. There's this psychological thing where your brain automatically fixes misspelled words, as long as the first and last letters are right. So most people who actually got that 1 in 10,000 roll just clicked single player and went about their day, never realizing they were looking at something incredibly rare. The whole thing actually gives us a weird look into Notch's head back in the day. He specifically designed this to be a secret that lived in the shadows, without anyone ever realizing that it existed. And the reason behind that is really weird. Back in 2012, he started a Reddit thread called Minecraft, a post-mortem. And to understand why he did that, you have to remember what the gaming scene was like back then. Anytime a dev tried to hide a secret in the game, the data miners and sweats would rip the files apart and post them on the wiki within hours. Notch was honestly tired of people ruining his surprises. He wrote that he intentionally made the code that way and made the change so tiny that he could finally have a secret in his own game that only he knew about. He wanted something that couldn't be data mined easily, because anyone reading the raw code would just assume mince raft was a typo and move on. Even though people eventually found it after a year, the idea of the creator hiding a secret in plain sight on the most popular game on Earth and no one realizing it existed is still a pretty cool concept. The funniest part about this Easter egg is how it survived the Minecraft buyout. Usually when a massive company buys an indie game for billions of dollars, they scrub away all the weird, messy secrets that the original devs had added to the game to make it professional. But Minecraft stayed. In fact, if your game ever crashes, one of the random joke messages on the error screen actually says, "You should try our sister game, Mince Raft." Even today, the devs at Mojang have to keep this typo alive. When they updated the main menu logo to look better on 4K monitors, a professional artist literally had to spend company time making a high-definition mince raft asset just to make sure the original joke never died. But as weird as a hidden typo is, it's nothing compared to what I'm about to show you next. This next Easter egg is basically sitting in front of you every time you play, but almost everyone fails to find it. The Woodland Mansion is easily one of the most intimidating buildings generated by the game in the overworld. But if you think the real horror here is just the vindicators or evokers lurking around the halls, you're seriously mistaken. The real nightmare is what these mobs are hiding behind the walls, where no one is ever supposed to look. See, one of the rarest and most unsettling secrets in the game is a room that is officially called the Fake End Portal Room. The reason you've probably never seen it is because it's a total architectural mess. It has no official entrance, and I'm being for real when I say no entrance, because the only way you'll ever find it is by literally tearing the mansion apart and digging through every wall until you stumble across one. And once you're inside, things get genuinely creepy. The room is a massive one-to-one replica of a Stronghold's portal room, but with a twisted DIY vibe. Since the Illagers aren't actual builders and can't make actual indestructible portal frames, they did the next best thing they could. They built the whole thing out of 12 blocks of green wool. They even dug out the floor and filled it with a pool of lava, trying to make a perfect recreation of a structure they've either seen deep underground or read about in some forbidden text. To really understand why this is so disturbing, you have to look at a real-world concept of a thing called a cargo cult. Basically, when isolated tribes see advanced technology, they sometimes build these makeshift, non-working replicas, like airplanes made of straw, hoping that if they just mimic the shape, they can magically summon the power. That is exactly what the evokers are doing. These guys are outcast villagers obsessed with dark magic and cheating death. They know the end exists, but they don't actually know how the portal works. So they built this dummy model out of wool in total secrecy, praying that if they got the geometry right, the universe might open the end dimension for them. But the creepiest detail isn't even the wool portal, it's what happens when you touch the walls. In a real stronghold, the portal room is always guarded by silverfish, right? Well, the evokers went to such obsessive lengths to copy the real thing that they actually sourced and placed 15 blocks of infested cobblestone inside this hidden room. If you break the stairs, the stone crumbles, and silverfish swarm you. They literally moved parasites into their own secret shrine just to make it feel authentic. That's a level of commitment that's honestly mental. And if you're thinking they would have insane loot over there, you would be wrong. because hovering right at the edge of the lava is a single, lonely chest. And if you're brave enough to open it, you'll find 2 real ender pearls, which means that these guys are successfully hunting endermen to study their magic. But here's the catch. That chest is a total trap. The chest is actually a trapped chest with TNT hidden under the floor. If you try to steal their artifacts, the floor detonates, blowing the shrine to pieces and dropping you straight into the lava. The cult would literally rather blow up everything they worked for than let you touch it for even a second. For this next fact, we are going to be talking about a pretty standard event in Minecraft. We're going to talk about death in Minecraft, which is usually a very simple in-game event. You run out of hearts, and the chat box tells the server exactly how you messed up. You burned to death, or you fell from a high place. It's all very dry and predictable. But if you start digging into the absolute craziest Easter eggs in the code, you'll find a handful of death messages that just don't really make much sense. Let's start with one that actually tries to get inside your head. Player didn't want to live in the same world as mob. You've probably seen this in Bed Wars or Sky Wars, but most people just ignore it. It usually pops up when you get hit by something right before you fall into the void. Normally, if you just fall into the void, the game says you fell out of the world, which is pretty simple. But if a monster even grazes your hitbox for a fraction of a second before you drop, the game completely changes the story and says that you didn't fall out of this world, and instead, it says that you actually chose not to exist. You see, the word world is doing a lot of work here. It makes it sound like a deliberate, conscious decision you made, like you literally refused to share reality with whatever just touched you. The interesting thing here that most people don't know is that the game engine is actually always holding on to your damage data, and it waits until the exact millisecond your health hits 0 in the void just so it can rewrite your death based on the specific scenario. But if you want to see the developers being genuinely cold-blooded, you need to hear this next death message. Player was killed by intentional game design. This happens if you get vaporized by a bed exploding in the nether or a respawn anchor in the overworld. But the crazy part is that the words intentional game design are actually a clickable link. If you click it, it takes you directly to a real official bug report on the Mojang website, specifically ticket number MCPE-28723. This is an actual archived ticket from years ago where a confused player reported their bed exploding, thinking it was a bug. Instead of fixing it, the devs turned that player's confusion into a permanent game feature. And no, the game isn't trying to be cute. It's looking you in the eye and telling you that they knew exactly what would happen and they just decided not to fix it. Then there are the ghost messages, the ones that were never even supposed to be seen by normal players. If you somehow manage to die from fall damage while landing in a pool of water, the chat box gives you the following death message: death.fell.accident.water. You'll notice right away, it's not even a proper sentence. This is what's called an internal string ID, and it was never translated into English because the devs assumed no human would ever be able to trigger it. See, in Minecraft, water is supposed to cancel out every single point of fall damage. Dying this way is meant to be mathematically impossible, but players always find a way to break the game, like in this instance, landing on a waterlogged slab while riding a minecart at full speed. When you hit that water, the game essentially has a stroke, and it runs out of words to describe what happened, so it just ends up showing you the raw code. Sometimes, though, a death message is just a survival mechanic for the game to keep itself from crashing. Player was killed by even more magic is an example of this protocol. You'll never see this in a normal game, as it only happens on heavily modded servers when a death message is too long for the game to handle. Like, I'm talking over 150,000 characters. If a variable, like a mob's randomly generated name, gets too big, the engine can't render the message without a catastrophic hard crash. So rather than letting the server die, the game immediately scraps the text and gives you this tiny fallback string. It refuses to tell you what killed you or acknowledge the item that caused the error. But arguably the most disturbing one isn't even about a death that actually happened. It's about a death that almost happened. Let me explain. You see, the message, "Player was roasted in dragon breath," has been sitting in the file since 2015, even though you can't get it anymore. Back then, it appeared that if you were burnt to death by fire that was let out by a dragon, and who's the only dragon in the game? Duh, the Ender Dragon. And then the game mechanics changed. Fireballs don't do impact damage anymore. They just leave behind that purple acid. That means in every modern version of Minecraft, there is a perfectly translated death message for a way to die that absolutely no longer exists in our world. And finally, for the last creepy and weird death message, we have to look at the very edge of the map. In the 1.20 update, they added a brand new message for players who manage to cross the world border. And mind you, it's 30 million blocks from spawn. If you spend a massive amount of time getting there and glitch outside that blue wall, you'll start taking damage until you die. When you do, the chat says, "Player left the confines of this world." However, the creepy part is not the act of leaving the world. The word confines is the whole point. They didn't say you died beyond the border or fell off the map. The devs specifically used a word that implies imprisonment, and it tells us that the world border was never a safety feature designed to keep the game from crashing. It might actually be a cage. Now that we've talked about some creepy game design facts, we have to talk about something related to the devs. You see, when you spend hundreds of hours building a house in a single-player world, you probably assume it actually belongs to you. I mean, it's common sense, right? It's your world, on your computer or phone, so obviously it belongs to you. Most people treat it like this private, offline sanctuary where nobody can touch your stuff unless you invite them in. But back in 2014, Mojang decided to prove that your sense of ownership is basically just an illusion. They pulled off this massive, silent override that hijacked the game's servers overnight. The devs did not release any update to download, nor were there any patch notes. People just logged into their worlds and realized the developers had forcibly altered their entire game without a notice. It was like waking up in your own house only to find out the landlord had changed the furniture and the locks while you were sleeping. The first thing everyone noticed was their own characters, which were not how they left them. Mojang just randomly decided to completely shut down the custom skin servers. It didn't matter what custom avatar you had or how many years you'd been wearing it. Every single person who logged in that day was trapped inside the body of a standard, big-nosed villager. And what makes this even more creepy is that you could not change it at all, and your custom avatars had completely disappeared overnight, turning you into an NPC in a game where you thought you were the main character. But the part that actually made them absolutely lose their minds was what happened the second they tried to move. Mojang had secretly partnered with a YouTube channel called Element Animation to completely overwrite the entire audio engine with a forced resource pack. Even the legendary quiet music by C418 was gone, and in its place, it was just some guy awkwardly singing the Game of Thrones theme song. It sounds funny now, but when you're alone in a silent world and the music suddenly shifts into a random human voice, it feels kinda creepy. I bet some of the players at that time thought their PCs had gotten hacked, and some might have even wiped them clean, without even realizing that this was all just an elaborate April Fool's joke. However, if you look at how this whole prank was actually executed, it's a lot more unsettling. The real creepy part about this is the total loss of control. Mojang proved right then that they hold the master keys to your reality. You can spend thousands of hours building a world, but the developers can flip a switch from their office and steal your digital body, and then even replace the sounds of your environment with a joke you literally cannot turn off. But as weird as it is to have your body stolen by the devs, it's nothing compared to this next secret, because only a tiny handful of players even know this Easter egg even exists. You see, There's a tiny detail in the warden's design that basically proves this thing was never meant to be a normal boss mob for you to just go out and kill. It's one of those things almost everyone misses because, let's be real, you're usually too busy running for your life to stop and stare at its face. But if you actually look at it, this one detail explains why the warden feels so much more creepy and unsettling as compared to a dragon or a literal three-headed skeleton. If you look really closely at the warden's head, you'll notice right away that it has no eyes. It's completely blind and relies entirely on the skulk sensors to see you through the vibrations of your footsteps. But then, if you look closely at its face, you will realize that there is something really wrong with this mob, specifically its mouth. If you look closely, you'll see a set of very human-looking teeth, and they don't look like monster fangs at all. They're flat, molar-like teeth. It's almost like the creature's mouth was reconstructed using the actual remains of humans. And this is where it gets insane, because the warden is found in the ancient city. So there is a possibility that its mouth was built using the remains of the builders who used to live in the ancient city. This also ties directly and almost perfectly right into the soul's mechanic we see in the warden's chest. And it might make you completely rethink the whole concept of the warden's identity. It turns out that the warden is not an animal or a random mob that evolved in a cave over millions of years. It's actually a biological mass that's been grown or summoned by the skulk itself. The biggest theory among lore hunters is that the skulk is actually a sentient parasitic fungus that does not just grow on rocks. Instead, it consumes the experience and the souls of anything that dies near it. So to put it into simple terms, the warden is a golem made of compressed souls and recycled body parts. That's the real reason why it has a heartbeat and why its sounds are so creepy. Some people even say that if you take the warden's idle speech and clean up the audio files, you can hear muffled crying and faint screams buried under the heavy thumping of its heart. Mojang hasn't officially confirmed that part, so it's just speculation. But it fits the lore, so imagine this. Every time the warden kills a player, it is essentially adding another soul to that glowing mass in its chest to make its own heartbeat just a little louder and faster for the next person who wanders into the dark after you're gone. The next mob in our list looks less scary than the warden. However, there is something deeply wrong with how it behaves. You see, while the evoker is already one of the most dangerous casters in the game, there's one specific behavior buried in its code that seems like a joke, but it actually reveals a disturbing level of detail when you think about it. If an evoker isn't in a fight and spots a blue sheep within 16 blocks, it drops everything to perform a very specific ritual. It raises its arms. Orange particles fly everywhere, and it starts this low rhythmic chanting. Then instantly, the sheep's wool turns from blue to bright red. And if you're a fan of old school strategy games, you probably recognize this. It's a direct tribute to the 1997 classic Age of Empires. In that game, the priest unit could convert enemies to your side by chanting the word Walalo, at which point the unit's color would flip from the enemy's blue to your team's red. Mojang didn't just give a little nod to this, they fully integrated it into their game in a very creative way. If you listen closely during the animation, the game actually uses a distorted, pitched-down version of that original Age of Empires sound effect. In the Bedrock Edition, this is even an official achievement called Walalo. But when you take a closer look at this whole scenario, it stops being a funny Easter egg and starts being kind of terrifying. I want you to think about how magic usually works in Minecraft. Almost everything is tied to a physical object. You need potions for chemistry, enchantment tables for gear, or totems for protection. But the evoker is one of the only things in the game that can alter the physical world through nothing but a simple incantation, which means that the evokers might be more powerful than we assume. because they can literally command this change to happen with their voice, literally rewriting the core identity of that sheep through sound alone. This adds a massive creepy layer to the illagers, because we already know that they build those cargo cult shrines, and that they've also managed to be immortal by using the totems, and they are actively cheating death. The sheep conversion is literally the final straw. It's almost like they are mocking us, and while we think they are weak, they might hold more power and they're just hiding it. And on top of that, they're also choosing the most passive, defenseless creature in the game to practice their reality-bending magic on. The physical properties of the world are just toys to them. However, this next mob has something really creepy going on with it. What we're about to talk about next might have happened to you while normally playing the game, but there is a high chance that you might not have understood it. You see, when you finally take down a witch, you're usually expecting some decent loot. They have one of the most complex loot tables in the game, dropping everything from glass bottles and sugar to redstone and glowstone dust. Most of those items make sense, right? They're the literal ingredients for the potions the witch is constantly throwing at your face. But there's one item on that list that's always felt completely out of place: the stick. A witch has a 25% chance to drop up to 2 sticks when she dies. For years, most players just assumed these were meant to be broken wands or maybe pieces of a shattered broomstick. But the truth is actually way more specific. It's a hidden reference to one of the most famous scenes in movie history, the witch trial from the 1975 film Monty Python and the Holy Grail. In that movie, there's a famous bit where a mob of angry villagers uses this broken chain of logic to prove a woman is a witch. They start by saying that witches burn, and since wood also burns, all witches must be made of wood. Then, to test if she's actually wood, they ask what else floats in water, eventually landing on a duck. Their final conclusion is that if the woman weighs the same as a duck, she must be made of wood, and therefore, she's a witch. The early Mojang team were massive fans of that kind of British comedy. They loved it so much they decided to take that flawed movie logic and turn it into a literal law of the Minecraft universe. By giving the witch a high chance of dropping sticks, the game is essentially confirming that on a molecular level, Minecraft witches actually are made of wood. This whole reference has essentially taken a joke about mob justice and turned it into a biological fact of the game world, which is honestly genius. And if you think it's the only weird thing the devs have done with the game, think again, because the Monty Python influence runs deep through the early years of Minecraft development. Like we talked about with the killer bunny, right? It's one of the most dangerous things you can find. And that's also a direct reference to the killer rabbit of Kerbanog from that same movie. The devs clearly had a blast taking these absurd comedic concepts and turning them into real threats that can actually end your hardcore run. So the next time you're in a swamp, kill a witch and see a couple of sticks on the ground. Just remember, the game isn't just giving you junk. It's actually just messing with you in a funny but kind of creepy way. Now, this next creepy Easter egg is not about a hidden thing in the game. It's more like existential horror. You see, in the 1.16 update, Mojang added this simple little feature for multiplayer servers, a game rule that lets owners decide exactly what percentage of players need to be in bed to skip the night. It was honestly just a practical tool to stop that one guy who stays deep in the mines and keeps the whole server awake while everyone else is trying to sleep. But if you dig into the math of how this rule is coded, there's a hidden, incredibly weird, logical paradox that most players will never actually see. See, the game's code is flexible, maybe a little too flexible. It lets you set the sleeping percentage to whatever you want, including numbers higher than 100. But this is where things start to break, because if you use a command to set that value to 101, you effectively break the entire concept of morning. The game tries to do the math and realizes that even if every single person on the server is in a bed, you're still exactly 1% short of the requirement. By typing that number, You've made a world where the sun is mathematically forbidden from ever rising again. And what makes this even more interesting is that usually when you break a game with a weird command, it just glitches out or gives you a boring error message. But Minecraft is different, because when you try to sleep under these 101% conditions, you don't get the standard sleeping through the night bar, and you don't get a technical error either. Instead, a very creepy specific line of text flashes right above your hotbar that simply says, "No amount of rest can pass this night." This part is creepy because it's one of those rare times where the developers chose to speak directly to you through the engine itself. In almost any other game, forcing a mathematical error like that would just result in a crash or a clinical message. But a developer at Mojang actually took the time to write a specialized, almost poetic response for this exact situation. Instead of telling you your command is broken, the game just tells you that the world is now broken, and there's nothing they are going to do about it. You have to just live with it or fix the command. And here's an interesting theory for you to think about. This whole scenario suggests that in the Minecraft universe, the sun does not follow a clock. It rises because of a collective agreement among the people living there. And by setting that percentage to 101, you've doomed yourself to an eternal night. And no matter how much you rest, the dawn isn't coming back. Back in the 2010 alpha days, the Nether was a much lonelier and creepier place than it is now. When the zombie pigmen first showed up in the Halloween update, Notch was basically building the entire game by himself. To save time, he had a lot of different things share the same files, and that led to one of the weirdest and most unsettling audio glitches in Minecraft history. For almost a year, the zombie pigman didn't have its own unique sound for when it got hurt. Instead, the code just used the exact same files as the player. So when you hit one, it didn't squeal like a pig. Instead, it let out a deep human grunt. This was the famous oof sound that everyone remembers from early Minecraft. Hearing a human scream come out of a rotting pig monster was just weird. Since the pigman was the same size as you and had your exact voice, fighting one felt less like fighting a monster and more like you were attacking another player. Now, technically, Notch was just being efficient, so using the oof for the pigman was just a shortcut to get the update out. But for the people playing, it felt like a massive hint about the lore. There was an original plan for pigmen NPCs to live in villages in the overworld, but it never happened. By giving the zombie version a human scream, the game made it seem like these things used to be people, or that they were related to you in some dark way. It's what started the theory that the Nether was just the remains of a civilization that got wiped out. Eventually, in 2011, Mojang changed the player's hurt sound to the one we have today, to make it all sound more natural. But the zombie pigmen actually kept that human grunt for a while before they finally gave it pig squeals. That connection was officially killed off when the 1.16 update came out. They replaced the old pigmen with zombified piglins and wiped the slate clean. The new mobs just sound like animals. They snort and grunt, and that whole theory of the pigmen being humans in the post got lost with this change. Everyone here knows the evokers. They are not that big of a deal in Minecraft and just randomly exist for some reason. However, in Minecraft Dungeons, the evoker is a mini-boss that acts like a total bully. Now, in most games, if a boss kills you, they just reset to their starting spot and stand there like a robot. But the evoker actually has a victory dance coded into its brain. It raises its arms, bounces up and down, and makes this happy sound, like it's celebrating its victory. And the weird part is that this behavior isn't just in the spin-off. It's hidden in the regular Minecraft we all play too, and it happens during a raid victory. If the illagers win a raid by wiping out a village or breaking every bed, their AI completely shifts, and instead of hunting you, the evoker starts celebrating. First, you will see it raise its arms like it's about to cast a spell, but instead of summoning Vexes, it just jumps around and makes this high-pitched laughing noise. And when you think about the lore, it's actually pretty dark. Most creatures in the game do things to survive, but the evoker is specifically programmed to feel joy. And what makes this creepy is that it only shows that happiness when everything around it is being destroyed, specifically when a village is being wiped out. That makes the evoker way worse than a normal monster. It's a creature that actually enjoys causing misery. What makes it even spookier is how the game works behind the scenes. Usually to save on processing power, mobs just stand still if you aren't around to see them. But the devs actually wrote a special piece of code just to make these guys celebrate, which means the game has these guys acting cruel, even if you aren't there to watch. Imagine walking through a dark forest and finding a woodland mansion. You look inside and see the evoker jumping and laughing because of a victory you didn't even know about. That's something really cursed. Honestly, I would crash out. In the winter of 2024, Mojang dropped an update that brought something genuinely spooky into the game. They added a place called the Pale Garden, and it's easily the creepiest forest they've ever made. When you walk into these woods, you will realize that it almost has no color. The grass, for instance, has a dusty gray color. The trees are bone white, and even the sky looks lifeless, which means that the devs wanted this biome to both look and feel creepy. But the part that actually messes with everyone's head is not the look of this biome, it's the monster that lives there. It's called the Creaking, and the way it's programmed makes the game feel like a terrifying version of red light, green light. To understand why the Creaking is so weird, you have to first realize that it's not actually a living animal. It's actually part of a block called the Creaking Heart that's hidden deep inside the trees. And because the monster is tied to that block, you can't actually kill it by hitting it. You can swing the strongest sword in the game or shoot 100 arrows, and it takes 0 damage. Every time you hit it, you will just hear a dry wood sound and see a trail of glowing orange dots. That trail, however, leads you straight back to the Creaking Heart. And the second you break that heart, the monster just instantly dies. Now, the way this thing moves is what really gets to you. People call it quantum observation, which is just a fancy way of saying it only moves when you aren't looking. If even a tiny bit of the monster is on your screen, it's a statue. It's just a piece of wood that can't hurt you as long as you stare at it. But the second you turn your head, even just a little, it wakes up. It starts sprinting at you and makes a high-pitched, rusty metal sound like a squeaky door. Fighting this mob in the game is a total nightmare because you have to keep looking at it to stay safe. But you have to look away to find the heart and win the fight. The whole story behind this mob gets even more disturbing when you look at the blocks you can build with. When you break a Creaking Heart, you get resin, which you turn into bricks. If you look closely at those bricks, you'll see a hollow-eyed face that looks exactly like the monster. This basically means that the Creaking isn't really a monster in the woods. It is the woods themselves. The Pale Garden itself is alive and trying to build a body to hunt you. When you use those bricks for your house, you're literally making your walls out of the faces of the monsters that were just trying to get you. The Pale Garden is also what the devs call a silent biome. Most forests are full of bird chirps and bug noises, but the Pale Garden is totally quiet during the day. There's no life there, and the only sound you'll ever hear is that loud creak echoing through the woods as soon as the sun goes down, letting you know the trees have finally woken up and they're coming for you. The Pale Garden sure is one of the creepiest things in the game. However, the next fact that we are going to talk about exists as a paradox in the current game. You see, back in 2011, when Notch was rushing to finish the ending for Minecraft, he added the dragon egg as the ultimate trophy. It was supposed to be the big reward for all those hundreds of hours you spent mining and just trying to stay alive. Back then, the devs actually promised the egg would eventually do something cool. Notch even said on Reddit that it was going to hatch into a pet dragon you could actually tame. But Notch left the company. The years went by, and that update just kept getting pushed back until everyone basically forgot. It went from being this massive mystery to just a dusty trophy for a feature that never actually happened. The way the dragon egg behaves is honestly the weirdest part here, as it basically refuses to be touched. Now in Minecraft, you can basically break or modify everything. The dragon egg, however, is the only thing that actively tries to run away from you. If you try to punch it or click it, it just teleports. It's like it has its own brain and wants to stay away from you, but it's stuck as an egg forever. And when you really think about it, that egg is the only proof of a species that'll never exist. You can technically bring the ender dragon back using end crystals, but that doesn't use the egg at all. The one you have is the only one of its kind. But the crazy part is that there is literally nothing in the code that could help you hatch it. It is a living thing, but the game has paused it in time forever, and there is nothing you can do about it. The paradox here is that since you have already killed one ender dragon, which was the only one alive, and now you have its egg that you cannot hatch, that means that this should be the end of the ender dragon species. However, players have discovered glitches where they can freeze the ender dragon and push it into the overworld using a sticky piston machine. Once you get it to the overworld, the game gets confused and ultimately spawns another ender dragon in the end, giving you 2 ender dragons at the same time in your world. But once you kill them, you're just ending that entire species with no way for them to continue because the egg is unhatchable. See, at one point, the players were begging the devs to finally let the egg hatch, maybe for a new boss or something, but they never did that. However, in the Trails and Tales update, they did add sniffer eggs that actually hatch into these giant prehistoric creatures. This proves that the game has the technology to make eggs hatch perfectly now, but they still chose to leave the dragon egg broken. For nearly a decade, the title screen world was basically the holy grail for seed hunters. You know, that blurred rotating panorama that sat in the background of the main menu from 2011 all the way to 2018? Whether you were hyped to start a new world or just staring at the screen after a creeper blew up your house, you were looking at this specific hazy hillside. But for 7 long years, that world was a total ghost because it was generated using an ancient version of the seed generator. And because the image was intentionally blurred out, pinpointing the exact terrain was considered mathematically impossible for a regular person to pull off. But that all changed in 2020 when a group called Minecraft at Home launched a massive global manhunt. They used a network consisting of thousands of volunteer computers all over the world. The processing power it took was also insane. It was like the equivalent of a high-end supercomputer running non-stop for 93 days straight, all condensed into a single day by a hive mind of PCs. On July 18th, 2020, the search finally ended, and they found the seed, which was 215-190-155-396-835-2745. When the first players loaded into beta 1.7.3 and traveled to the coordinates, they described it as this eerie, almost religious experience. They found the exact trees and the pool of water that had been the backdrop of their entire childhoods. Dinnerbone later confirmed that this wasn't some carefully staged marketing shot or a hand-built map either. Notch just took a quick screenshot during a random test of the new terrain generation back in June 2011 and decided to use it on the home screen. It was just a random moment in development that accidentally became the face of the game for 7 years. When Mojang finally updated the title screen for the update Aquatic, the original world was effectively deleted. It only existed in the memories of the community until that seed was recovered. Walking through the seed today feels inherently wrong, because for years, the blur gave it this sense of mystery, but seeing it in high definition reveals a raw and silent landscape. This is what I would classify as a liminal space, a familiar location that was never actually meant to be visited by someone. Now, for the last fact, we are going to talk about something that every single one of you must have seen at some point in your lives, but there are details that you might not know. I'm talking about the paintings in Minecraft. And what if I told you that these paintings are not random pictures at all? They're actually tiny windows into worlds that don't even exist anymore. For years, most of us just walked past these things without realizing we're looking at stuff that's been erased from the game. Almost all the original paintings were made by an artist named Christopher Zetterstrand, but when his oil paintings were ported into the game, they were chopped up and changed in a way that feels really weird. Take the Skull and Roses painting, for example, the 2x2 one with the skeleton head and the red flowers. It looks like a simple spooky decoration, right? But the original painting it came from is way darker. In the real version, there's a woman sitting on a couch in a flooded house, just staring into space, while a human skull floats in the water right in front of her. When they put it in Minecraft, they cut her out completely. They erased the person and the house, leaving only the skull. Then there's the painting called The Void. It shows an angel-like figure kneeling at the edge of a black hole with fire down below. The artist actually made this to represent a glitch. You know how sometimes when you die, your camera falls through the floor and you see the bottom of the world where everything is just black? That's what this is. It's a picture of the place you go when the game breaks. The most famous one is probably Skull on Fire. It's the giant 4x4 painting of a burning skull with a dark hill in a background. For a long time, people thought the background was just a random drawing. But in 2020, a group of players proved it's a real place you can actually visit. The artist loaded up a world in 2010, took a screenshot, and painted the skull over it. You can actually go to the coordinates. X equals -249, Y equals 91, Z equals -29 in the seeds on the screen, and stand exactly where that skull has been floating for 15 years. And that's about it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you are still awake, I suggest watching the Hightail video that's on your screen right now. It's very similar to Minecraft, and I'm sure you're gonna love it.